August 24, 1944, 4:30 hours 72 minutes before death. Commander Samuel Dealey hadn't slept in 31 hours. He stood on Harder's Bridge in the pre-dawn darkness off Dassal Bay, watching the eastern horizon begin to lighten from black to deep purple. The air was thick with tropical humidity. Sweat soaked through his khaki shirt despite the relative coolness of the early morning. In his right hand, Dealey held a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He'd forgotten to drink it. His mind was occupied with tactical calculations, threat assessments, and the gnawing instinct that something was wrong with this patrol. Harder had been operating off the western coast of Luzon for 9 days. 9 days of hunting, attacking, evading. They'd sunk 2 Japanese coastal defense vessels on August 22nd. Good kills, clean attacks, but since then the Japanese response had been different, more coordinated, more aggressive, more intelligent. Dealey had fought the Japanese Navy for 2 years. He knew their patterns, understood their tactics, could predict their responses. But over the past 48 hours, something had changed. The Japanese weren't reacting the way they usually did. They were anticipating American submarine movements, positioning their anti-submarine forces more effectively, coordinating their searches with an efficiency he'd never seen before. It felt like they were hunting him specifically, like they knew Harder was here and had developed tactics designed to counter his aggressive approach. Lieutenant Sam Logan, the officer of the deck, approached quietly. "Captain, sonar reports intermittent contacts bearing 45 degrees. Classification uncertain. Could be fishing vessels, could be patrol craft." Dealey raised his binoculars and scanned the bearing. The darkness was fading quickly now. Visibility was maybe 2 miles and increasing every minute. He saw nothing, but that didn't mean nothing was there. "What's the range?" "Sonar estimates 8,000 to 10,000 yards, sir. Contacts are stationary or moving very slowly." Dealey lowered the binoculars. Fishing vessels would be stationary, nets deployed. But patrol craft might also remain stationary, conducting a sonar search, waiting for a submarine to reveal itself. "Distance to USS Hake?" Dealey asked, referring to the other American submarine operating in the area. "Last position report put her approximately 4 miles north of us, sir. She should be submerging about now." Standard procedure. American submarines patrolled on the surface at night, taking advantage of their diesel engine speed and the difficulty of being spotted in darkness. At dawn, they submerged to avoid Japanese aircraft and conducted daytime operations underwater. Dealey checked his watch. 4:32. Sunrise was at 6:23. They had nearly 2 hours of semi-darkness remaining. Plenty of time to investigate those sonar contacts, determine if they were threats, and submerge before full daylight exposed them. But something made him hesitate. That instinct again. The feeling that he was being set up, that those fishing vessels were exactly what the Japanese wanted him to investigate. "Captain," Logan prompted. Dealey made his decision. "Clear the bridge, take her down to periscope depth. We'll investigate those contacts submerged." Logan looked surprised. Investigating surface contacts while submerged was slower, less effective, but he didn't question the order. "Aye, sir, clear the bridge, dive." The lookout scrambled down the hatch. Logan followed. Dealey took one last look at the lightening horizon, then dropped through the hatch himself, pulling it shut behind him. Harder's bow dipped as the diving officer flooded the ballast tanks. Within 90 seconds, the submarine was submerged at 60 feet, moving at 4 knots toward the mysterious contacts. Dealey had just made the decision that would determine whether his crew lived or died. He didn't know it yet, but by choosing to submerge rather than investigate on the surface, he'd eliminated his best chance of escape. 4:48 hours, 64 minutes before death. Harder glided through the dark water at periscope depth. Dealey stood at the attack periscope, one eye pressed to the eyepiece, slowly rotating the scope through 360 degrees. The pre-dawn light was still dim, making it difficult to identify contacts at any significant range. "Sonar con, report all contacts." The sonar operator's voice came through the intercom, calm and professional. "Con, sonar, 3 contacts bearing 45 degrees, range approximately 7,000 yards. Classification still uncertain, sir. Screw noises suggest diesel engines, but signature is not consistent with fishing vessels." Not fishing vessels? That confirmed Dealey's suspicion. These were patrol craft and they were searching for submarines. The question was whether they'd detected Harder yet. Sound signature analysis? Dealey asked. A pause while the sonar operator refined his assessment. Sir, contacts are consistent with Kaibaken-class escort vessels, possibly CD-22 or similar. They're pinging actively with Type 93 sonar. Dealey's jaw tightened. CD-22, he knew that designation. It was one of Japan's newer coastal defense vessels specifically designed for anti-submarine warfare, fast, maneuverable, equipped with modern sonar and depth charges, dangerous. And there were 3 of them. Sonar, new contact, bearing 135 degrees, range 4,000 yards, closing fast, high-speed screws. Sounds like another escort vessel, sir. Dealey swung the periscope to the new bearing. Through the dim light, he caught a glimpse of a ship's bow cutting through the water, heading directly toward Harder's position. It was close, too close. 4 escort vessels, one ahead in a search line, one behind moving to cut off retreat. This wasn't a random patrol. This was a coordinated trap, and Harder had just swum into it. All ahead 1/3, make your depth 200 feet, rig for silent running. The diving officer acknowledged the order. Harder's bow angled downward. The submarine descended slowly, trying to minimize noise. At 200 feet, she leveled off and continued on course at 3 knots, barely moving, trying to be invisible. In the control room, every unnecessary system was shut down. The air conditioning stopped, and the temperature began to rise immediately. Men moved carefully, avoiding any sound that might be detected by the searching vessels above. Dealey stood at the plotting table, studying the tactical situation. 4 escort vessels in a coordinated search pattern. Harder was roughly in the center of their formation. If they maintained course, they'd pass within 2,000 yards of at least 2 of the escorts. If those escorts were pinging actively and knew what they were doing, they'd detect Harder. The smart move was to go deep and slow, drop below 400 feet where temperature layers might hide the submarine from sonar, and wait for the escorts to move away. It was the safe move, the doctrine-approved move. But it also meant staying in the trap longer, giving the Japanese more time to refine their search, possibly calling in more vessels to saturate the area. Dealey considered his options. He could attack, use his remaining torpedoes to sink 1 or 2 of the escorts, then try to escape in the confusion. It was the aggressive approach he'd used successfully for 5 patrols. But with 4 escorts coordinating their search, attacking would reveal his exact position and bring all 4 down on Harder simultaneously. Or he could try to slip away, move slowly and quietly, staying deep, hopping the temperature layers would hide him from their sonar. It was the cautious approach, un-Dealey-like, but maybe the smart approach. For the first time in his combat career, Samuel Dealey chose caution. Maintain depth 200 feet, slow to 2 knots, let's try to sneak past them. 5:12 hours 40 minutes before death. For 24 minutes, Harder crept through the depths like a ghost. The escort vessel's sonar pinging was constant, the metallic echoes reverberating through the water, creating an almost physical pressure on the nerves of everyone aboard. Dealey watched the plot develop. The 3 escorts ahead had maintained their search line, moving slowly northward. The 4th escort, the one that had approached from behind, had turned and was paralleling Harder's course, staying about 3,000 yards away. They hadn't detected her yet. The temperature layer at 180 feet was partially masking Harder's acoustic signature, but that wouldn't last forever. Eventually, one of those escorts would get lucky, would ping at just the right angle, and the game would be over. Sonar, contact bearing 45 degrees has changed course, now heading directly toward us, range 5,000 yards and closing. Dealey felt his stomach tighten, speed of contact. Estimate 15 knots, sir. 15 knots? That escort wasn't conducting a search pattern anymore, it was prosecuting a contact, which meant they'd detected something, maybe not Harder directly, but some indication that a submarine was in the area. Come left to course 180, increase speed to 4 knots. Harder turned south, trying to open the range from the approaching escort, but increasing speed meant making more noise, which increased the chance of detection. Dealey was caught in the classic submarine commander's dilemma: stay slow and quiet but remain in danger, or speed up and risk revealing your position. Con, sonar, second contact is also changing course. Multiple contacts now converging on our position, sir. The trap was closing. However, the Japanese had detected Harder. They were now moving multiple vessels to box her in. Make your depth 350 feet. Harder's bow angled downward again. The submarine descended, passing through the temperature layer that had been providing some protection. The hull creaked as water pressure increased. Men glanced nervously at the depth gauge. 350 feet, 375 feet, 400 feet. Level off at 400 feet. The diving officer brought Harder level. The submarine hung suspended in the dark water, deeper than she'd been all patrol. This deep, they were below the effective range of most depth charges, but they were also becoming blind. Sonar worked less effectively at this depth. They couldn't raise the periscope. They were operating on instruments and instinct. Con, sonar, contact bearing 45 is directly above us, sir. Range 1,000 yards, they're slowing down. Dealey understood what that meant. The escort had lost the precise contact but knew roughly where Harder was. They were slowing to conduct a more detailed search, probably preparing to drop depth charges. This was the critical moment. If Dealey surfaced and ran, Harder might outrun the escorts on the surface. The submarine was faster than these coastal defense vessels in calm seas, but surfacing meant exposing the entire submarine to gunfire, and with 4 escorts coordinating, at least one would get into firing position. If he stayed deep and silent, the escorts might drop depth charges but probably wouldn't score a direct hit. Depth charge attacks were notoriously inaccurate. Most submarines survived them by staying quiet and deep. Dealey chose to stay down. It was the wrong decision. The first depth charge exploded at 5:24 hours, 300 yards off Harder's starboard side and 100 feet above her. The explosion wasn't close enough to damage the submarine, but the shock wave hammered through the water like a physical blow. Men grabbed handholds as Harder shuddered from the concussion. Light fixtures swayed, loose equipment rattled, but the hull held. Con, sonar, hearing breaking up noises above us, they're dropping another pattern. Dealey braced himself. The second pattern exploded 15 seconds later. 6 depth charges in a spread pattern designed to bracket a submarine's possible position. 2 exploded close enough that Harder's lights flickered and went out momentarily before emergency lighting kicked in. In the dim red glow of emergency lighting, Dealey watched his crew. They were scared, anyone would be, but they were holding together, doing their jobs, trusting their captain to get them through this. Dealey had gotten them through similar situations before, 19 depth charge attacks over 5 patrols. Every time he'd brought them home safely, this would be the same. Except it wasn't the same. This time the Japanese escorts weren't dropping random patterns and hopping to get lucky. They were conducting a methodical search, refining their estimates with each pattern, gradually tightening the noose. Con, sonar, multiple contacts now, at least 4 vessels above us, sir. They're coordinating their attacks. 4 vessels, hundreds of depth charges between them, and Harder had nowhere to go. The ocean bottom was 600 feet down, too deep for Harder to rest on. Going shallower meant making herself a better target. Staying at 400 feet meant riding out the attack. A third pattern exploded, this one closer. Harder lurched violently to starboard. Men were thrown against bulkheads. The sound was indescribable, not just loud but a pressure that seemed to squeeze your entire body. Damage report, Dealey ordered. Reports came in from throughout the submarine. A hydraulic line had burst in the forward torpedo room, minor flooding in the after battery compartment. Cork insulation was raining down from the overhead throughout the boat, but nothing catastrophic. The hull was holding. Con, sonar, lost contact on all escorts. Multiple screw noises can't separate individual contacts. The escorts were deliberately creating acoustic confusion, making it impossible for Harder's sonar to track them accurately. It was a sophisticated tactic that Dealey had never seen the Japanese use before. Another pattern exploded, then another. The attacks were coming faster now, the escorts working in rotation to maintain constant pressure. Harder's hull groaned under the repeated shock waves. Pipes began to leak, gauges cracked, men's faces showed the strain of enduring an attack that seemed to have no end. Dealey checked his watch. They'd been under attack for 18 minutes. The average depth charge attack lasted 30 to 45 minutes before the attacking vessels ran out of depth charges or lost contact. Harder just had to endure a bit longer. But this wasn't an average attack. "Captain, we need to surface." It was Lieutenant Commander Frank Lynch, Harder's executive officer. His voice was calm but urgent. "We're taking damage faster than we can control it. If we stay down much longer, we won't be able to surface at all." Dealey knew Lynch was right. The cumulative damage from repeated near misses was adding up. Nothing catastrophic yet, but dozens of small leaks, damaged systems, stressed welds. Stay down much longer, and one more close explosion might be the one that cracked the pressure hull. But surfacing meant facing 4 escort vessels on the surface, where Harder would be vulnerable to gunfire. The submarine's 5-inch deck gun could engage 1 escort at a time, but with 4 coordinating their fire, Harder would be overwhelmed. "Not yet," Dealey said. "We can take more. They'll run out of depth charges soon." Another explosion, the closest yet. Harder rolled 15 degrees to port before the diving officer could correct. The lights went out completely for 10 seconds before emergency power restored them. "Con, engineering, we've got a significant leak in the after engine room. Not critical yet, but it's getting worse." "Con, forward torpedo room, hydraulic system is completely failed. We've lost hydraulic pressure to the bow planes." The damage reports were coming faster now. Systems were failing. Harder was being beaten to death by repeated shock waves, dying by inches. "Con, sonar, contact bearing 270 degrees, closing fast. Very close, sir, inside 500 yards. One of the escorts had gotten a solid contact and was charging in for a close-range depth charge attack. This was the killer run. If they dropped charges from directly overhead at this depth, the pressure hull would almost certainly fail. "Emergency surface, blow all ballast tanks. Surface, surface, surface." The diving officer didn't hesitate. He hit the switches to blow compressed air into all ballast tanks simultaneously. Harder's bow pointed upward at a 30-degree angle. The submarine began rising rapidly. Too rapidly. At 300 feet, the escort directly above them dropped a full pattern of depth charges set to detonate at 250 feet. The explosions caught Harder just as she was passing through that depth. The effect was catastrophic. The explosions tore through Harder's pressure hull in multiple locations. The after-engine room flooded completely within seconds. The stern began to sink while the bow continued to rise, creating a nearly vertical angle that threw everyone not holding onto something against the aft bulkheads. "We're flooding aft," someone screamed. Dealey grabbed the periscope housing to keep from falling. Around him, the control room was in chaos. Water was pouring in from multiple leaks. The depth gauge showed 200 feet and rising, but the depth was meaningless now because the submarine was at a 60-degree angle. "Close the watertight door to the engine room, seal it." Men struggled against the angle and the water to close the massive watertight door between the control room and the flooding aft compartments. They got it shut and dogged down just as water reached chest height in the passageway. But closing the door meant sealing off the after third of the submarine, including the after torpedo room and engine rooms. Anyone still back there was trapped. Harder's bow broke surface at 5:48 hours. The submarine exploded upward out of the water like a wounded whale, her stern still submerged, her bow pointing toward the sky at a 45-degree angle. For a moment, she hung there impossibly, balanced between sinking and floating. Then her stern dragged her back down. She settled at a steep angle with just her conning tower and forward deck above water. Water poured into the still-open main induction valve, flooding into the submarine from above. On the surface, 800 yards away, CD-22 and minesweeper PB-102 saw their prey. Both vessels turned toward the crippled submarine, their deck guns training on target. In Harder's control room, Dealey pulled himself to his feet. Water was ankle-deep and rising. The submarine was settling, going down. They had minutes at most. "Abandon ship," Dealey ordered quietly. Then louder, "Abandon ship, everyone topside, move, move, move." Men scrambled for the hatches. The control room hatch was jammed, warped by the explosions. They couldn't open it. That left only the forward torpedo room hatch. Dealey pushed through the men toward the forward compartment. Through the torpedo room, get topside through the forward hatch. The torpedo room was a nightmare. Water was pouring in through ruptured hull seams. The space was filling fast. Men waded through chest-deep water toward the forward escape hatch. The first man reached the hatch and spun the wheel. It moved. The hatch opened. Sunlight poured in, blindingly bright after the dim emergency lighting. One by one, men climbed through the hatch onto Harder's forward deck. The submarine was settling rapidly, the forward deck already awash. The conning tower was tilting backward as the stern sank deeper. Japanese gunfire began. 25 shells splashed into the water around the submarine. One hit the conning tower, ricocheting off with a metallic screech. The escorts were closing in, firing deliberately now that they could see their target. Dealey stood in the torpedo room, waist-deep in water, counting men as they climbed through the hatch. His training was automatic. A captain is the last to leave his ship. He would make sure every man who could be saved was topside before he went up. But he didn't know that the after compartments were already completely flooded. Didn't know that 23 men were trapped back there, already dead or dying. Didn't know that even if he stayed aboard forever, he couldn't save them. The water in the torpedo room reached his chest, his neck. A sailor grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward the hatch. Dealey shook him off. Get topside, I'm right behind you. But he wasn't right behind them. He was watching the water rise, calculating how much time was left, making sure no one else was coming forward from the aft compartments. The water reached the overhead. The torpedo room was completely flooded. Dealey took a deep breath and dove toward the escape hatch. He never made it. 5:52 hours death. At 5:52 hours on August 24, 1944, USS Harder, SS-257, sank in approximately 3,000 feet of water off Dassault Bay, Philippines. The submarine went down by the stern, settling at an increasingly steep angle until she slipped beneath the surface completely. 79 men were aboard when she died. 15 made it topside before she sank. 8 survived long enough to be picked up by Japanese vessels. Commander Samuel Dealey was not among them. His body was never recovered. The official report lists him as killed in action along with the other 78 men aboard Harder. The 8 survivors were taken to Japanese POW camps. 3 died in captivity from disease and maltreatment. 5 survived the war and were repatriated in September 1945. Their accounts provided the only detailed information about Harder's final moments. According to survivors, Commander Dealey was last seen in the forward torpedo room, attempting to ensure all crew members had escaped before abandoning ship himself. The submarine sank while he was still aboard. The Japanese patrol vessels CD-22 and PB-102 remained in the area for several hours after Harder sank, dropping additional depth charges to ensure the submarine was destroyed and picking up survivors. They recovered debris, oil, and personal effects that confirmed the kill. The wreck of USS Harder was discovered in 2024 by underwater exploration team Lost 52 project. She lies in 3,750 feet of water, approximately 12 miles west of Dassault Bay. The wreck shows massive damage to the after third of the submarine, consistent with the depth charge attack described by survivors. Her bow section is relatively intact. The forward torpedo room hatch remains open, the last escape route for the men who survived. The aftermath, what we know now. The Japanese had indeed been hunting Harder specifically. Naval intelligence had identified the submarine based on her aggressive tactics and her history of sinking destroyers. They'd assigned 4 of their newest anti-submarine vessels to patrol the waters off Dassault Bay specifically because intelligence suggested Harder was operating in that area. The coordinated trap wasn't luck or coincidence. It was a deliberate operation targeting the submarine that had killed more Japanese destroyers than any other. Dealey's aggressive tactics had finally caught up with him. For 5 patrols, his approach worked because the Japanese weren't expecting it. But by August 1944, they'd adapted. They developed tactics specifically designed to counter aggressive submarine commanders. The question that haunts military historians: if Dealey had known the Japanese were specifically hunting him, would he have changed his approach? Based on everything we know about Samuel Dealey, the answer is probably not. He was a combat commander who believed in aggressive action. Changing tactics to become more cautious would have meant abandoning the philosophy that made him successful. In a way, Dealey was a victim of his own success. His tactics worked so well that the Japanese had to develop new counter-tactics. When those counter-tactics were deployed against him, he didn't adapt quickly enough. The legacy question: was Dealey reckless? Did his aggressive approach unnecessarily endanger his crew? The statistics suggest otherwise. Over 5 war patrols, Harder destroyed 18 enemy ships, including 5 destroyers. His crew suffered 0 casualties until the 6th patrol. That's an extraordinary record that suggests calculated risk rather than recklessness. But the 6th patrol was different. Something had changed in the Japanese anti-submarine capabilities. Whether Dealey recognized that change quickly enough is debatable. What's not debatable is the impact his tactics had on submarine warfare. After Dealey demonstrated that submarines could successfully attack destroyers, American submarine doctrine changed. Submarines became more aggressive. They attacked warships instead of just merchant ships. The results were devastating to the Japanese Navy. Between June 1944 and August 1945, American submarines sank 214 Japanese warships using tactics pioneered by Dealey. That includes 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, and 38 destroyers. Harder's 5 patrols changed submarine warfare. The 6th patrol ended it for Dealey and his crew. The loss of USS Harder and Commander Dealey was a significant blow to the submarine force. Admiral Lockwood wrote in his autobiography that Dealey's death was one of the most painful losses of the war. He was proving that submarines could dominate surface forces. His loss set back our offensive by months. But the tactics survived him. Every submarine commander in the Pacific studied Harder's patrol reports. They learned from Dealey's successes and eventually from his final patrol. The lesson was clear: aggression works, but it can't be mindless. Even aggressive tactics must adapt to changing enemy capabilities. That might be Samuel Dealey's most important legacy, not just that he changed submarine warfare, but that his final patrol taught the submarine force that even successful tactics must evolve.